They said I was too loud, too confident, too passionate. Like being excited about my work was a threat. Right finger if you've ever been told to tone it down. This story is for you. Don't scroll. It started with whispers. Little comments drop like crumbs in the hallways of Orion Media Group. You don't have to talk so loud, Naomi. You're really intense in meetings. Or my personal favorite. She's great, but she doesn't know how to tone it down. Tone it down. That phrase haunted me. Because what they really meant was tone myself down. See, I was the only black woman in the room. The first in the company's history to make it to senior marketing director. I worked twice as hard, stayed twice as late, and still had to smile twice as wide. Just to be seen as professional. And yet, all they could talk about was my voice. Not my numbers. Not the record-breaking campaigns I built. Not the clients who asked for me by name. No, it was always, "She's a little much." They said it like it was feedback. But really, it was a warning. Don't make us uncomfortable. I remember one meeting. I presented a campaign that boosted engagement by 200%. The CEO didn't even look up from his phone. He just said, "Naomi, maybe next time, let someone else present. You come off intense." That night, I went home and sat in the dark. And for the first time, I questioned if being myself was too much. Too bold, too bright, too visible. But then I remembered my grandmother's words. Never shrink for people who were born to stay small. So I stopped apologizing. I stopped whispering. I stopped making myself smaller to fit rooms that were never built for me. And when they said, "Naomi, your voice echoes," I smiled. Because finally, it was meant to. Every Monday morning meeting was the same routine. I'd walk into that glass-walled conference room, the one overlooking the city skyline, and the energy would shift. They'd talk over me. Cut me off mid-sentence. Steal my ideas and repackage them with a smile. And when I finally raised my voice to defend my point, they'd call me aggressive. Aggressive. The corporate word for, "You made me uncomfortable by standing up for yourself." I remember one day, during our quarterly planning session, I suggested a campaign that would focus on Black and brown audiences, young, digital native, diverse. It wasn't charity, it was smart business. Those audiences are the future. But Eric, our creative director, leaned back in his chair and smirked. "That's a little niche, don't you think? Let's keep it universal." I wanted to laugh. Universal, in corporate speak, always meant white. I looked around the table. No one said a word. Lisa, the PR manager, my so-called ally, gave me that awkward, tight-lipped smile, the one that said, "I agree with you, but I'm not going to risk saying it out loud." That was the day I realized something. It wasn't just about my voice. It was about their comfort. They didn't want to hear me because hearing me meant confronting everything they pretended wasn't real: bias, inequality, blind spots. So, instead, they called me too loud. Because it's easier to silence a woman than to listen to her. Weeks turned into months, and the comments didn't stop. I started getting left off important emails. Invites to leadership meetings, accidentally, didn't include me. When I asked why, HR said, "Oh, it must have been a mix-up." But mix-ups don't happen every week. It was a pattern, a quiet campaign to erase me without firing me. And still, I showed up. Every single day. I showed up in bright colors. With big ideas, and an even bigger smile. Because I refused to fade just to make them feel safe. But it's exhausting, trying to shine in a room built to dim you. One afternoon, I stayed late to finish a proposal, one that could bring in a multi-million-dollar client. As I was reviewing slides, I overheard Eric and Lisa talking in the next room. They didn't see me standing by the door. Eric said, "She's talented, but she's just too much. You can't lead with someone who thinks every meeting's a TED Talk." Lisa laughed. "Yeah, HR said she's been getting complaints. Maybe she'll tone it down after her review." That's when I realized my upcoming performance review wasn't about my performance. It was about silencing me. When I walked into that HR meeting, the tone was already set. 3 people sat on one side of the table: HR representative, my manager, and Eric, all smiling that fake, polite smile. Naomi, the our representative, started. We value your contributions. You're incredibly driven, but we've received some feedback about your communication style. My communication style? I asked. She nodded, flipping through a file. Some of your colleagues feel you can come across as intense. Overpowering. Overpowering. They said it like it was a crime. I looked at Eric. He couldn't even meet my eyes. I asked, would you say the same thing if my voice sounded different? The room went silent. No one spoke for a full 10 seconds. That's when I knew the answer. The our representative cleared her throat. We just want to make sure everyone feels comfortable. Perhaps try softening your tone in meetings. I smiled. But inside, something broke. Because I realized, no matter what I said, they had already decided who I was. On my way out, Lisa stopped me in the hallway. She put a hand on my arm and said, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. It's not fair. I'll talk to HR for you. And I wanted to believe her. I really did. But there was something in her voice, too smooth, too practiced. It didn't sound like comfort. It sounded like control. That night, I sat in my car in the parking lot long after everyone else left. The city lights blurred through the windshield, and for the first time, I felt small. Like the walls I had spent years climbing were now closing in on me. I whispered to myself, maybe I am too loud. Then I caught my reflection in the mirror, eyes tired but burning, and said out loud, no, I'm not too loud. They're just too comfortable with silence. That was the night everything changed. Because from that moment on, I stopped speaking to be heard. And started planning to be understood. When Monday came, I walked into the office like nothing had happened. But something had happened. The silence that followed me wasn't the usual kind, not the polite kind. It was heavier. Like people knew something they weren't supposed to. Tasha, from accounting, avoided my eyes. The interns stopped whispering when I passed by. Even Marcus, my manager, the same man who once said I held this place together, couldn't look at me straight. Something was off. By noon, my email pinged. Subject: clarification request, Q4 bonus distribution. It was from our. I opened the spreadsheet attached, and my stomach dropped. Every single person on the project got their bonus. Except me. I scrolled again, thinking maybe I'd missed my name. Nope. Line 12, where Layla Carter should have been blank. The only explanation? Someone manually removed me. I walked to Marcus's office. He was pretending to read something, glasses low on his nose. Hey, I said calmly, I just checked the Q4 bonuses. Mine's missing. Must be an error, right? He didn't look up. Layla, these things come from higher up. You know that. Higher up. That was his way of saying, don't ask questions. Marcus, I led that project. We hit record profits. He finally looked at me, but not with respect. With fear. You should let it go, he said softly. It's not worth it. I wanted to ask, not worth what? But something in his eyes told me, he couldn't say. That night, I stayed in the office long after everyone left. The hum of the air conditioner was my only company. I opened the financial system. I knew where the files were kept. I'd built half of the system myself. The same access they thought I'd forgotten I had. The bonus log was there. Line 12, Layla Carter, $0. But right below it, a hidden field. A comment. Bonus redirected to executive pool by E. Rowland, per approval from CFO. E. Rowland. That was Evelyn Rowland, the CFO. The woman who once told me she believed in women supporting women. The next morning, I walked into the break room. People were whispering about the annual awards dinner that weekend. Evelyn was there, laughing too loudly. She turned when she saw me. "Layla, you're still here?" she said, smiling with that practiced, tight expression. "As in, not at brunch?" I smiled back. "Oh, I'll celebrate later, after I check the final numbers." Her smile faltered, just for a second. But that second was enough. That night, I went home, made some tea, and opened a blank document. Title: The Bonus That Disappeared, and Where It Went. I started writing. Every detail, every timestamp, every message. By 2 a.m., I had 26 pages. Proof, screenshots, system logs. But I didn't send it to our. Not yet. Because I had a better idea. I remembered something from the Leadership Summit last year, Evelyn bragging about the company's transparency initiative. She said they'd display employee achievements on a digital billboard in downtown Atlanta to celebrate the team. That billboard was still live. And the IT dashboard that powered it was still on the same server I'd helped build. I opened the Access console. Typed my credentials. The cursor blinked. Waiting. Access granted. A quiet smile formed on my face. If they wanted transparency, I was about to give it to them. Voiceover lowers. Cinematic tone deepens. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. Sometimes it's the truth, broadcast for everyone to see. And by the end of that week, every person in downtown Atlanta would know exactly where my bonus went. The city was still asleep when I made my move. 5:47 a.m. The streets of downtown Atlanta were painted gold by the first hints of sunrise. Delivery trucks rumbled, streetlights flickered, and on the corner of 12th and Peachtree, the company billboard glowed faintly in the dawn mist. I sat in my car, laptop open, coffee in one hand, thumb hovering over the enter key. One press. That's all it would take. For months, they'd ignored my emails, my reports, my results. But they wouldn't be able to ignore this. I took a deep breath and whispered to myself. Let's make it transparent. Enter. The system blinked. Lines of code rolled like waves across my screen. The billboard refreshed. First, the company logo. Then the headline they'd written for their transparency campaign. Celebrating our leaders. Except now, it said something else. Celebrating our leaders, and where the money really went. It started slow. A few passers-by stopped, squinting. Then phones came out. Cameras flashed. One woman gasped, pointing up. Because on the 50-foot screen, under the smiling faces of the executive team, was a spreadsheet. Not just any spreadsheet, the Q4 bonus distribution list. And right next to Evelyn Rowland's name, a note. $28 transferred from employee bonus pool. The crowd grew. Cars slowed. People started recording. And within 10 minutes, it hit Twitter. Then TikTok. Then every group chat in the company. By 8 a.m., my phone was vibrating nonstop. Marcus, even Evelyn herself. "Layla, did you do this?" she hissed when she finally reached me. Her voice was trembling, not with anger, but fear. I didn't raise my voice. "Transparency, remember? I just helped you live your values." She sputtered. "Take it down, now." I looked out my window at the billboard, glowing against the morning sun. Screenshots already flooding social media. "I don't think I can," I said softly. The people seemed to like it. By noon, the story was everywhere. #BonusGate was trending. Someone made a meme of Evelyn's LinkedIn photo next to the spreadsheet. A local news anchor called it the boldest corporate clapback of the year. I didn't post a single thing. I didn't have to. The internet did it for me. At 2:30 p.m., my badge access was revoked. Security escorted me out, again. But this time, people clapped. Real applause. Not mockery, not pity. Applause. One of the interns, the same one who'd avoided eye contact a week ago, whispered, "You're a legend." And maybe I wasn't a legend. But for once, I felt seen. That night, my inbox overflowed. Messages from employees across the country. Thank you for standing up. I thought I was crazy for thinking something was wrong. I wish I was that brave. And one message stood out, from a journalist I'd met years ago at a conference. Ms. Carter, I've been following your story. Would you go on record about corporate theft and retaliation? This could change things for a lot of people. I looked at my reflection in the laptop screen. No makeup, no suit, just me. And for the first time in years, I didn't see exhaustion. I saw purpose. I typed back. I'll talk, but not for revenge, for truth. The next morning, the company issued a statement. Unforeseen data breach, they said. Unfounded allegations. Committed to diversity and transparency. But no one believed them. Screenshots don't lie. The board accepted Evelyn's resignation 3 days later. Marcus was transitioned. And I was offered settlements, jobs, even book deals. But I didn't take them. Not yet. Because what I wanted wasn't money. It was meaning. Voice lowers, emotional. In a world full of polished lies, maybe the real power was never in silence or submission. It was in truth, the kind you couldn't bury behind boardroom doors. And if one billboard could do that, imagine what a movement could do. When the flames died down, what remained was silence. The kind of silence that follows a storm. Not peace, not yet, but a deep, electric stillness, like the world itself was waiting to see what I'd do next. 3 days after the billboard went viral, I was officially terminated for misconduct. No surprise there. They said I'd violated policy, endangered company property, and breached internal confidentiality. I just smiled when I read the letter. Because that same morning, the New York Ledger ran a full headline. Corporate transparency scandal rocks tech firm. Employee exposes $28,000 misappropriation. And below it, my photo. No filters, no power suit, just me, standing in front of that same billboard. Eyes steady, hair natural. My inbox exploded again. Hundreds of messages, some from strangers, some from people I hadn't heard from in years. Former coworkers wrote, "You said what we couldn't." Students from HBCUs wrote, "You made us proud." And one message changed everything. It was from Asha Foundation, a nonprofit led by Black women investors. They'd been one of the company's largest early stakeholders before pulling out after the scandal. The email was simple. Layla, we saw what you did. Let's talk. 2 days later, I sat across from 3 women in an Atlanta cafe, all sharp. Calm, powerful. They didn't speak much at first. They just studied me. Finally, one of them, Miss Celeste, a tall woman with silver braids and a calm authority that could cut glass, leaned forward and said, "You risked everything for honesty. That's rare. What's next for you?" I hesitated. "I don't know," I said. "I thought telling the truth would feel like freedom. But now it just feels like standing in smoke." Celeste smiled faintly. "Baby, that's what freedom always feels like at first, smoke from the fire you walked through." Her words hit deep. She continued, "We're building something new, a consulting initiative, IntegrityWorks. We need voices like yours. People who aren't afraid to look a CEO in the eye and say, 'No more lies.'" My breath caught. For the first time since I lost my job, I felt seen, not for my rebellion, but for my values. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked out to my balcony. City lights glittering below. The world looked quiet, peaceful, but my mind burned. Was I ready to be that person? Not just the woman who exposed the system, but the woman who could rebuild it. I thought of my mother's voice that night she'd called. "Baby, they can take your job, but never your purpose." And suddenly, I knew. The fire didn't destroy me. It forged me. 6 months passed. IntegrityWorks grew faster than any of us imagined. We started small, workshops for young Black professionals on navigating corporate spaces without losing yourself. Then bigger. Partnerships with Fortune 500s. Advising on ethics and representation. Irony of ironies. The same companies that once ignored women like me were now paying to learn from me. I wasn't naive. I knew change wouldn't happen overnight. But every time a young intern told me, "I wore my natural hair today because of your video," I felt something shift. A quiet revolution. Not loud, not flashy. Just steady, one honest act at a time. And then came the call. From Gibson Media Group, one of the biggest daytime talk shows in America. They wanted to feature my story, from fired to fearless. The studio lights were blinding. The host smiled at me across the stage and said, "Layla, millions watched your Billboard moment. But what people want to know is, would you do it again?" The audience hushed. I looked out at their faces, curious, skeptical, hopeful. And I said, "Yes, every single time. Because when you're quiet to protect your paycheck, you lose more than your job, you lose yourself." Applause erupted. But the tears came from the back row, a young girl. Maybe 19, clutching her notebook, whispering, "That's what I needed to hear." That's when I knew, this wasn't just my redemption. It was ours. After the interview, the clip went viral again. Hashtag the Billboard woman. Hashtag truth pays. Hashtag Layla Carter speaks. But this time, it wasn't about exposure or scandal. It was about empowerment. People were quoting the line from my segment. "When you stand in truth, you might lose a job, but you gain yourself." It was printed on hoodies, mugs, murals. I even saw a high school classroom in Detroit painted on their wall. Months later, I visited that same intersection, 12th and Peachtree, where it had all started. The billboard was still there. But this time, it was different. It showed a new message. IntegrityWorks, building workplaces worth believing in. Founded by Layla Carter. I stood there, the wind in my hair, and smiled. Not out of pride, but peace. Because the woman who once whispered, "Let's make it transparent," was no longer afraid to be seen. I walked away that day knowing one thing for sure. They burned my bridges thinking I'd drown, but all they did was light my path. And I'll keep walking it. For every woman who's ever been told she was too bold, too loud, or too much. For every man who thought integrity had no place in business. For every soul who still believes honesty can't win. It can. It does. And I'm living proof. It started like déjà vu. The same gray building. The same polished hallways. The same smell of burnt coffee and fear. Except this time, I wasn't walking in as an employee. I was walking in as a witness. The Ethics and Corporate Oversight Committee had called a public hearing. The company, my former company, was under federal review for financial misconduct and retaliation. They wanted to question everyone involved in the Bonusgate scandal. And me? I was the centerpiece. When I entered the conference hall, cameras flashed. Rows of journalists filled the seats, their pens ready. Reporters whispered my name like I was both legend and cautionary tale. "Is that her? The Billboard woman? Can you believe she's back here?" I stood tall. Not because I wasn't nervous, but because I was done letting fear own my posture. At the front of the room, Evelyn Rowland, the same CEO who'd once smiled as she signed my termination papers, sat stone-faced. But this time, her lawyer sat beside her. Her eyes flicked to me only once. And in that second, I saw it, the flicker of guilt. Or maybe fear of the truth she couldn't bury anymore. The lead investigator cleared his throat. "Ms. Carter, you understand that this hearing is public record?" "Yes, sir," I said. "That's exactly how it should be." They asked me to recount everything. From the missing bonus funds. To the internal emails. To the morning the billboard lit up downtown Atlanta. I told it all. Calm, steady, no bitterness, just facts. Because I'd learned something powerful. When your truth is real, it doesn't need to scream. Then came Evelyn's turn. Her lawyer stood, sharp and cold. "Ms. Rowland," he began, "did you authorize or participate in any misconduct?" She hesitated. The cameras zoomed in. For a moment, I almost pitied her. The woman who'd built her empire on manipulation and image. Then she said, "I did what I thought was best for the company." The room went silent. The investigator leaned forward. "Best for the company, or best for your own account?" A hush. Then, a sound. 1,000 camera shutters clicking at once. Later that afternoon, the committee displayed the evidence. Wire transfers. Email threads. Testimonies from accounting staff. Every lie she'd built her career on, peeled away in front of the world. And then, something unexpected happened. The committee chair looked at me. "Ms. Carter, after everything you've experienced, do you have any statement you'd like to make for the record?" I rose slowly. Walked to the microphone. And for a brief moment, I thought of my mother. Her words echoing like prayer. "Baby, they can take your job, but never your purpose." I looked around the room, the cameras, the press, the faces watching through their screens at home. And I said, "This isn't about revenge, it's about remembering who we are when no one's watching." In a world obsessed with winning, I chose to stay honest, even when it cost me everything. Because if truth makes you the enemy, then maybe the system was never worth protecting. Silence. Then applause. Not polite, but thunderous, rolling through the hall like a heartbeat. I stepped back, eyes stinging. Because in that sound, I heard every worker who'd ever been silenced. Every woman who'd been told she was too much. Every person who'd been punished for doing what was right. 2 days later, it made headlines. CEO resigns amid fraud scandal. Whistleblower praised for integrity. Evelyn's empire crumbled overnight. Stock prices fell. Her resignation letter leaked, cold, detached, unapologetic. But the people didn't care about her anymore. They cared about something else. The truth. By the end of that week, universities invited me to speak. Podcasts called. Networks wanted interviews. But I didn't say yes right away. Because before I could tell the world what to do next, I needed to remember why I'd started. So, I went home. Sat on my porch. Watched the sunset turn the sky to honey and fire. And I whispered, "We did it, Mama." The wind blew through the trees like an answer. A few weeks later, the Asha Foundation hosted an event called Truth in Business. They unveiled a new scholarship in my name, the Layla Carter Integrity Fellowship, for young women of color pursuing ethics and business law. As I stood at the podium that night, I looked out over the audience, hundreds of faces, shining, hopeful, fearless. And I realized something profound. The girl who once lost everything for telling the truth had built something that could never be stolen. "You see," I said into the microphone. "They tried to end my story. But they forgot. I write my own endings." Applause again. But this time, I didn't cry. Because I understood now. My story wasn't just mine. It belonged to everyone who'd ever fought to stay honest in a world that rewarded lies. And as the lights dimmed, I walked off stage smiling. Not with triumph, but with peace. Because truth doesn't need to roar. It just needs to stand. And that's exactly what I did. There's a kind of quiet that comes after chaos. Not the sad kind, but the sacred kind. The kind that lets you breathe again. After everything burned down. The job, the title, the noise. I remember waking up one morning to sunlight spilling across my floor. For the first time in years. There was no alarm clock. No board meeting. No fake smiles. Just silence. And peace. And I thought, this is what freedom sounds like. I started walking every morning after that. Just me, my sneakers, and a coffee cup that said, "Still standing." The world looked different, not because it changed, but because I did. The air felt cleaner. My shoulders felt lighter. I wasn't rushing to prove myself anymore. I was finally learning to be myself. One morning, I saw a young woman sitting outside a cafe, crying into her laptop. She looked like me, 10 years ago. So I walked up and asked, "You okay, baby girl?" She said, "They fired me. I gave them everything, and they just let me go." And I smiled, not out of pity, but understanding. I told her. Maybe they didn't let you go. Maybe they set you free. She looked confused. But that's how truth feels at first, confusing. Then healing. I told her about my story. The boardroom, the lies, the downfall, and how it almost broke me. And I said, they can take your seat, but they can't take your soul. If you hold on to that, you'll rise again, higher than before. We sat there for an hour. Two strangers. Two survivors. Two women learning that losing something fake isn't the end, it's the beginning of everything real. Later that week, I got a letter. Handwritten. From one of my old assistants. It said, Layla, after you left, I thought the company would fall apart. But it didn't, at least not right away. It took months. Then the truth came out. People saw who was really running things, and who was pretending. You were right all along. Thank you for showing us what real leadership looks like. I cried. Not because I missed that place. But because, for the first time, someone saw me for what I was trying to do all along. Not perfect. Not powerful. Just honest. Voice softens. You know, my mama used to tell me. Baby, God don't waste pain. He'll use it to build something you can't see yet. Back then, I didn't get it. But now, I do. Every broken piece. Every sleepless night. Every tear. Wasn't wasted. It was shaping me. Teaching me grace. Teaching me strength. Teaching me how to walk through fire, and come out glowing. Not bitter. When people ask me now, Layla, do you miss that life? I smile. And I say, I miss the view, but I love the vision. Because now, I'm building something that's mine. My consulting firm, True North Strategies. A place where integrity isn't a slogan on the wall. It's the air we breathe. We hire women who've been overlooked. Mothers who got pushed out. Young people who just need someone to believe in them. And every time I walk through those doors, I remember that boardroom. And I whisper to myself, this is what rising looks like. Sometimes at night, I still think about that last meeting. The cold faces, the silence, the moment my badge stopped working. And then I think about the laughter I hear now. From my team. From my clients. From the woman I've become. And I realize, I didn't lose anything that mattered. Here's what I want you to take from all this. Don't let failure define you. Don't let fear silence you. And don't let anyone convince you that doing the right thing is naive. Because the truth? It's never naive. It's revolutionary. When you walk in truth, you walk in peace. And when you walk in peace, you walk in power. So keep your heart soft. Keep your standards high. And keep your faith steady. Because the storm doesn't mean you're lost. Sometimes, it means you're being rerouted to where you truly belong. Voice fades into warmth and hope. So here's to every woman who was ever told she's too emotional. Too loud. Too much. You're not too much. You were just in the wrong room. Find your room. Build your table. And when you do, make sure there's space for someone else to sit down and rise too. Because the story didn't end in that boardroom. It began the moment I walked out. And maybe, that's the lesson. The fire that tried to destroy me was the same fire that refined me. And now? I burn brighter than ever. For years, I thought success meant keeping quiet. That being professional meant smiling when I wanted to scream. Nodding when I wanted to question. And shrinking when I wanted to shine. I thought if I just worked hard enough, stayed long enough, earned enough respect, the truth would speak for itself. But the truth doesn't shout. It whispers. And you have to be still, brave, and honest enough to hear it. When you build a career in rooms that were never built for your voice, you learn to measure yourself by how little space you take up. You learn to say, it's fine, when it isn't. You learn to dim your passion so no one calls it aggressive. You learn to apologize for simply existing too fully. But the truth? You can't hide your light forever. And when you finally stop trying, When you let yourself be seen exactly as you are, something powerful happens. People start to remember you not because you blended in, but because you refused to. I used to think my loudness was a flaw. Now I see it was my power. Every time I spoke up, I wasn't just making noise. I was breaking silence that had been kept for generations. Every time I stood my ground, I wasn't being difficult. I was being real. And being real? That's rarer than any title. That's worth more than any salary. You see, truth is not always gentle. It doesn't always feel good. Sometimes, it will cost you your comfort, your circle, even your career. But truth is the foundation you can rebuild your entire life on. Lies can open doors, but only truth can let you sleep at night. There's a peace that comes when you stop pretending. When you stop performing for approval. And start living in alignment with your values. You no longer chase validation, you embody it. You no longer wait for someone to say, "You're enough." You know it. And in that moment, the world can no longer control you. Because people can take your position, your paycheck, your title. But they can't take your truth. That's the one thing that always comes back to light. When I walked out of that boardroom, I thought I was losing everything. My reputation, my stability, my future. But I was only losing what was never real. What was built on compromise instead of conviction. And in losing that, I found something stronger. My voice. My values. Myself. So here's what I learned. You don't have to be perfect to be powerful. You don't have to have everyone's approval to be enough. You don't have to win every battle to live a victorious life. You just have to be honest, with yourself, with others, with the world. Because the moment you choose truth over convenience, you stop surviving and start living. You stop existing for applause and start walking in purpose. And if you're listening right now, if you're standing at that same crossroads I once faced, don't be afraid of what honesty might cost you. Be afraid of what losing your truth will. Because every time you hide who you are, you trade peace for permission. And peace is the one thing no one can hand you back. So take a deep breath. Speak the truth. Even if your voice shakes. Even if they walk away. Even if you have to start over from nothing. At least it'll be real. And from real, you can rebuild anything. Because truth doesn't destroy, it refines. It burns away the lies, the masks, the fear. Until only the strongest, brightest version of you remains. And when that version stands up again, she doesn't need permission to shine. She is the light. So if my story meant something to you today, hit that subscribe button, not for me, but for you. Because every week, we share real stories like this. Stories about strength, truth, and rising when the world says you can't. Leave a comment. Tell me what part hit your heart. I read every one of them, because your story matters, too. And if you know someone who's walking through their own fire right now, share this with them. Sometimes, one story can be the light someone's been waiting for. This is Layla. Still standing, still believing, still telling the truth. And I'll see you in the next story. Stay true, stay kind, stay powerful.